Hey, welcome everyone. We are just waiting for a minute or so before we get started to make sure everyone can join. Glad you all could make it. And just make sure for those who have entered that you can see the chat. We'll be using that to communicate. So Amanda from Leland is my wingman. She is helping manage the meeting. Amanda, let me know once we have a good group of individuals and we'll get started.
I think you're good to start whenever. I think we've kind of had the waiting room fill in.
Okay, perfect. So welcome again, everyone. I'm based on the Pacific time zone, so over here it's afternoon. Hopefully you all have some time set aside where we can go over what I wanted to cover today, which is basically crafting a successful MBA application and what you want to be doing across the 90 days or so that we have before the deadlines start to hit. So the agenda for today is I want to talk a little bit about the landscape that we are in with the MBA admission cycle this year. I want to talk about this 9-day plan that will help you get to that successful application. But really, I want to focus in on what you should be doing in or have been doing these first 30 days of the application cycle. So I want to leave you with tangible, actionable insights that you can use as you craft your MBA applications. I definitely want to leave 10 minutes or so at the end for you to ask questions that you have. Just use the chat feature to type those in, and Amanda is monitoring and she'll help me collate those and we can answer some of the questions. It'd be great as we're getting started if you can just start typing in what industries you're in right now. So that'll help me understand a little bit about whether we're finance heavy today or we're marketing heavy today, and I can tailor some of the content that I describe to that. So just go ahead, start typing in, and I'm going to move ahead with my slides. Great, I see the answers coming in already. Thank you. So just a quick brief background about myself. I've been doing MBA consulting for about 15 years. I graduated from the Booth School of Business myself, helped with the admissions office there, reviewed hundreds of applications. And over the last 15 years that I've been doing this, very proud to say my clients have gotten into all the top 5, top 10 schools globally. And honestly, what I'm most proud of is that scholarship amount because that really enables unlocking this MBA dream for those individuals that aren't quite able to attain this financially because of restrictions they may have. So it's been a very fulfilling journey. I just love helping people tell their stories and really differentiate themselves. And that's good segue into this next slide, which is a little bit of a wake-up call. So I think all of you know this. I'm not telling you anything that will be a surprise to you, but over 80% of the applicants to the top business schools aren't going to get in. It's just so competitive right now. What we're seeing is, especially with the macroeconomic environment, I was meeting with the admissions teams earlier this summer, and we were all in Paris. INSEAD was hosting us. And there's just, with the economy being soft in the major economies, a lot of individuals are looking to take 2 years out, invest in themselves, and then come back out with an MBA degree. And hopefully by then the economy is stronger. So application volumes were up across all top 10 schools, record numbers last year, and all admissions offices are predicting the same. So what does that mean for you? A little bit of a harsh reality, and that is that there's very little differentiation between talented applicants. Everyone has strong GMAT scores, everyone has strong GPAs, they're working at big companies that are well known to the admissions offices, and so it's easy to get lost in this noise. My goal as an admissions officer is to craft a well-rounded class from this talented pool that will be in front of me. And that's your biggest hurdle to overcome. So if you think about why you are planning to go to business school, you want to make sure that you graduate with a network that will help you throughout your career. You are also hoping that while you're in business school, when you look to your left, when you look to your right, and are interacting with your colleagues, these are individuals from whom you can learn. So as an admissions officer, I want to make sure that the class is well-rounded. There's no ethnic concentration, there's no demographic concentration, there's no industry overweighting on any one thing. And so you have to make sure that you're articulating what value you'll bring to the school, not just what you will take away from the school. And the last thing I want to leave you, last insight I want to leave you with is applications are read quickly. So you have to be able to make sure that your message comes across right away, and that each component of your application, from essays to the resume to the recommendation letters, they're all complementing each other. Applications are read for those admissions teams that live in big cities. They may be read on the bus ride into work. They may be read on the train commutes. Um, Adcoms are typically reviewing hundreds of applications a cycle. So they're just going through this quickly. So everything, every word that you put together in your application matters. And there has to be thought given to the message that you're trying to convey. So what this means is that you have to stand out, and no matter what you think, you're part of the crowd. So convince the AdCom that you bring unique attributes to the table. And honestly, what'll help you do that is if you have a clear vision. I speak to so many applicants and they start out with, yeah, I want to graduate and start my own business. Oh, great, great goal. But what are you doing 5 years after the MBA? What's your business doing? What are you doing 10 years after the MBA? What are you doing 15 years after the MBA? You have to be able to articulate those questions and answer them in your application. Now, admissions officers know that you don't have a crystal ball, that you can't predict the future, but they're looking for that discipline and that maturity of thought so that you've at least thought about it and you have a plan B. Should things not work out, what are you going to do? And why is it that this specific business school is right for you? So these are some of the things to be thinking about as you're working through this 90 days. And so this is where we come up with the plan. And I've just started it based on the June month. It's almost over, but by the end of this month, if you're hoping to hit the September deadlines, you should have shortlisted your schools, finalized your elevator pitch. Your resume should start to look like an MBA resume, and you should have started your networking calls. And I'm going to go into this in more detail because that's the purpose of this webinar, focus on this first 30 days. But then as you go into July, you're in the writing mode, you're either taking or retaking the standardized tests, you continue networking, meeting with students and alumni, you're having conversations with your recommenders. And then in August, it's just pedal to the metal. You're working on your content, refining, rehashing your essays, making sure the recommenders are on track. You start working on your application forms. You're concluding your networking and weaving in those stories into your essays. And then September is all about finalizing everything, making sure everything is buttoned up and you hit submit. So what I wanted to do was focus in on June, the first 30 days. So what do I mean by shortlisting your schools? This is a diverse group of individuals that are on this call, and you may have already done this, but think about which schools are going to be good fits with you. It's really, really important in this first 30 days to be thinking about which school is going to position you for success. And not every school is going to do it the same way. Each school has a different personality. Each school has different goals. Some may be focusing on a specific sector, a specific industry. All are great generalists, but they have specific strengths that you have to be able to highlight in your application. So think beyond the rankings. Too many of my clients, they get caught up in it has to be a top 5 school. And as I look back across my 15 years, those that have had the most fulfilling experience with their MBA were individuals that picked a school based on fit, not just ranking. Because if you end up at a school that's not a good fit with your aspirations and your personality, you're going to have a miserable 2 years. And oh, by the way, you're going to go into six-figure debt. So just be careful. How are you getting to know these schools? The more engagement you have with these schools, appropriately, no one's saying you should be harassing the admissions teams. It'll help you write better essays and bring clarity to your application. And so I'll talk a little bit more in a few slides what it means to be engaging with these schools. The other thing I mentioned in that first 30 days section is you should be finalizing your elevator pitch. So for those of you who may not be familiar, an elevator pitch is just simply if you had 45 to 60 seconds in an elevator with the dean of admissions of that business school, what is it that you would say to them to convey your entire story right in those 45 to 60 seconds? And here's a template that has, hey, school name, you should admit me because here's my long-term career goal. And here's how I'm going to get to the career goal in the medium term, short term. This is the perfect time for me to go get my MBA because insert the reason, and then communicate why you are ideal for that school. Like, why should they consider you? What value are you going to bring to that school? The elevator pitch is never going to be used verbatim in any of your materials. So you won't just copy and paste this and drop it into your essays or your application form. But the way you should think about the elevator pitch is make sure you're checking everything that you put together against your elevator pitch so that somewhere in that essay, somewhere in that recommendation letter, you're hitting all of these. And so like an example of an elevator pitch, it doesn't have to be verbatim this format, but an example could be, I'm an immigrant to the US, a country that has given me so many opportunities to succeed. And I now want to give back to the federal government by making it more efficient. Sloan is the only school where it makes sense to get my MBA because of its data-driven analytical emphasis and its unique decision-making frameworks. Now is the perfect time for me to get an MBA because et cetera, et cetera. Or you could take a very different approach and say, hey, Ross, you need to admit me into your full-time MBA class because I want to become a more effective brand manager and contribute to the US economy and manage Pepsi's Southeast Asia marketing. Now is the perfect time for me to get an MBA because I have over 5 years of relevant experience and I can no longer advance in my career unless I learn ABC. Ross is the perfect fit for me because it follows a community-based decision learning approach and provides excellent global opportunities for me to study abroad. And I would add to Ross because of my team building skills and my ability to handle crises, right? So you're starting to get an idea that these elevator pitches are what are going to form the framework of how you position all of the different components of your application. And I'll send this slide out after we're done so that you have it and you can sort of start testing your application components out. So continuing on what we should be thinking about in this first 30 days, you should start getting to a point where your resume is approaching this final draft. The MBA resume is different from your professional resume. This is also an area where applicants get tripped up. There's a lot of information that the AdCom is not going to care about. The MBA resume is something that should highlight the leadership attributes that you decided in your elevator pitch. And that isn't done by talking about the nuances of a leveraged buyout that your firm led and the spreadsheets that you worked on, right? You instead want to zoom out and talk about some of the leadership that you showed in the different roles that you've held. Now, why are you working on the resume so early? It's because it's going to be important for networking. And I talked about that in how to engage with the different schools. You want to be able to send this MBA resume to the different individuals you're going to be speaking with ahead of time so they have a sense of the conversation that's going to be happening. The resume will also, if you work on it early, I found over the years, it really helps individuals uh, figure out the professional story that they want to communicate in their application rather than leaving it as an afterthought at the end. So once you're done with this one-page resume, it becomes very clear, hey, when I'm answering the essay question that asks when I've demonstrated leadership or what matters most to you, um, you, by having worked on the resume, can weave in a lot of this professional content into your essays and your application. It also helps you identify the gaps that you will need to articulate in your application. So if it turns out that you haven't had exposure to a certain sector, then you can actually talk about your essays and say, this is why it's important for me to get my MBA from Stanford because they actually have a healthcare offering where they put you in touch with Silicon Valley health tech startups. And this will help me bridge the gap that I have because long term, I want to be implementing an innovative healthcare offering in India, right? I made that up. But working on your resume now will help you figure out what those gaps are so that you can talk about them in your application. The networking strategy. So this is the final big component that you should be finalizing right now. Um, it's not enough just to read the website of a school. It is not enough just to read the blog posts and follow social media. And it's not enough just to attend the admissions events. That's important, but you should be figuring out a comprehensive networking strategy. So you're looking at not just who's in your network, professional, personal, but who are the second order network contacts who you can begin doing outreach to. The MBA community is tight knit, it's small, and there's a strong culture of giving back. So do not hesitate to reach out cold through LinkedIn to individuals that got an MBA from that institution several years ago and say, hey, you're in the exact field that I want to be after my MBA. And I noticed you went to this school. Would you have 30 minutes to talk to me about your experience at Columbia? You would be stunned at how often alumni will be willing to give of their time. Look at the different student clubs on campus. Who is it on the Wharton campus that is leading the management consulting group or the finance club? Reach out to the chairs of those clubs and say, hey, do you have time in the coming weeks for a 30-minute coffee chat? So you want to get in a habit of every 2 weeks or so, you're speaking to someone because you're gonna learn nuggets that will be beneficial to use in the application. And there's nothing wrong with name dropping. So in your essays to be able to say, I spoke to John Smith, class of uh, 2020, who is doing exactly what I want to be doing. And he mentioned his experience at Kellogg really helped him to attain the career that he always aspired to, right? So you're weaving in the fact that you have spoken and taken time to really get to know that school. And then the last thing I'll say is just make sure if you're able to, that you're visiting campus. It's very different when you can talk about just walking across the Chicago campus rather than just say that you've heard about the Chicago campus and how the undergraduate energy is apparent because the business school is close to the undergraduate buildings, and this is exactly the type of environment you want to be part of. So just make sure you're able to make time. For those of you that aren't able to come to campus, oftentimes these schools are coming to your cities, to your regions, so make sure you're making time. The admissions teams travel to these events and they remember who they interact with. Um, you want to be someone who they can recall when they're sitting down to review your application, and you'll be really surprised at how often they'll remember you, both the good experiences and the bad experiences, right? Hey, this person was really obnoxious, cut in line, spoke out of turn. You don't want to be that individual, but they will remember. And you'll be surprised at how often alumni or students you interact with will tell the admissions teams that, hey, I spoke to so-and-so. They really have their act together. Give them another look when you read their application. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so then zooming back out, this is that 90-day plan that I was referencing. And we're coming up on the last 5-7 minutes of this webinar. So feel free to type in questions in the chat. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer what may be on your mind. And while we're waiting for that to come through, some of the other things that I'll bring up that I've noticed for this year is that schools have become, I feel in the last 2 cycles, risk averse. And that's just a feeling I have from talking to the different admissions teams. Where previously they were okay admitting, I'm going to make this up. A dance instructor who may want to go on and have a career on Wall Street, they're now going to take those chances. Just the economy is such where they want to make sure that you have some relevant experience in your background that connects to that long-term goal that you have. So it's important that you be able to draw that straight line from where you are today and where you want to go in the future, and how an MBA from that specific business school is going to help you attain your career goals. Try not to be that person that is saying, hey, I opened many dance studios, I've scored high on the GMAT, and I want to go into buy-side investment banking because of reason A, B, and C. That's going to position you poorly, or it's going to put additional hurdles in your way. So I see some questions coming in the chat. I'll read them off. How do you decide between round 1 and round 2 applicants, and what may be an MBA resume versus normal resume? Yeah, absolutely. I always advise my clients to apply in round 1. It signals interest, that you have your act together, that you've already decided, and here are the reasons why. The only caveat to that is apply when you're ready. Don't rush to submit in round 1 if you are going to be just sprinting to the finish line. You're not doing yourself a good service by just submitting something that's incomplete. So always submit when you're ready, but if you're able to, submit in round 1. In terms of what makes for an MBA resume versus normal resume, I touched on this slightly earlier, where you want to make sure that you're not going too much into the weeds, giving too much detail. The AdCom is not an expert in your field. They're looking to see what leadership attributes you have demonstrated. So every bullet needs to highlight leadership. Don't just go into things that you did. Talk about things that demonstrated your command and your leadership. Save the job description for the application forms. There's going to be a section in the application forms where you can type in what you did and what your responsibilities were. The resume really needs to focus on the leadership that you demonstrated. Okay, how many schools is it typical to apply to? That really depends on your strategy. I like to advise my clients on having a comprehensive approach. So have a dream school, something that you're reaching for the stars. It's aggressive. Your scores may not be, they may be on the lower end. I'll never stop you or advise you against doing that. Hey, this is an MBA, right? Like, go for it. But then have 2 to 3 schools that your target schools and have 1 or 2 safety schools. So if you put that together, you're talking about a 4 to 5 school strategy. You can apply to more, but in my experience, I've found that the quality of the application starts to decline. You just don't have enough time. You have a full-time job, you have a personal life, and working on an MBA application is like getting a part-time job. So if you're applying to more than 5 schools, in my experience, it's been suboptimal. In terms of the app form itself, does it have steps or do we just upload every part when we can? The app form, it has steps, but you don't have to submit everything. You can work on it piecemeal, and once you're done and are ready to submit the application, that's when you can hit submit. If the outcomes are not as open to non-traditional applicants, is differentiating yourself more difficult? No. Differentiating yourself is differentiating yourself. It doesn't matter whether you're a non-traditional or a traditional applicant. Everyone struggles with the same issue. You have to identify the core things that you will bring to the table based on your background and talk about those differentiating features. So being traditional versus non-traditional doesn't really impact that. Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, so I'll just read sequentially. For individuals from the typical background, consulting finance, round 1 is probably the best thing you can do. Is that true? Round 1 is probably the best thing you can do no matter what, because again, it avoids that rush of applicants. Round 2 tends to have more. And so you just have a clean slate that the adcoms are working from. So try to hit round 1 if you can. Okay, so I'm going to pause over there. I know there's additional questions coming up. I strongly recommend, please reach out to me. Let me know what questions you may have. My profile is listed right here in this link, and this QR code will also take you there. I'm also offering a round 1 discount. So for anyone who's part of this webinar, by using this code, we'll get $500 off any of the tiers. Send me a message. I'll send this deck out so that all of you have it. You can have that overall plan with this focus on the first 30 days. A lot of people signed up for this webinar. I don't want to just blast it out. All of you took time out to attend it. So if you send me a message, I know exactly who is there, and I'll send you the presentation. And I'll be having more webinars. I plan to, because I want to focus on the next 30 days and the final 30 days. So happy to be of help in this journey. It's an exciting one. It seems overwhelming. It's an intense process, but you all have done amazing things. And so as long as you have a plan in place, you're going to arrive at the end and hopefully be very successful with what you're trying to attain. So Amanda, I think that's all I had to cover. If there's anything else that you wanted to add.
Nothing else on my end.
Excellent. Well, it was a pleasure, everyone. The recording will be available, so you can view this later, and then I'll send out the slides. Just shoot me a message, and would love to get to know you a little bit better.